I could invite everyone to take a seat, we're going to get started with the next side event. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the side event, Tackling the Climate Crisis at Altitude by Fostering a Community of Practice. My name is Alex Mackey, and I'm a project manager at Zoe Environment Network, which is an environmental NGO based in Geneva, Switzerland, and also a member of the Adaptation at Altitude program, who organized this side event today. So I'd like to start by briefly introducing the agenda. On the next slide, please. All right, so first I'm just going to introduce the Adaptation at Altitude program and talk a little bit about what we do. Then we're going to have a panel discussion with some different experts who are here with us today and joining from Zoom. Initially, we were planning on having some small group discussions, but based on the size of the audience, we've decided instead I'm going to pose a question and kind of present it to everyone here. And then we're going to have a little opportunity to ask some questions to our panelists too. Okay. And next slide, please. So the Adaptation at Altitude program is funded by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, and it unites a variety of organizations who work together to collaborate to increase resilience and adaptive capacity of mountain communities and ecosystems in the face of climate change. We work with several organizations, including the Mountain Research Initiative and GeoMountains, CONDESAN, ICIMOD, UNEP, the Stockholm Environment Institute, University of Geneva, and Zoe Environment Network. Next slide, please. So we primarily focus on several mountain regions, which include the Andes, South Caucasus, East Africa, and the Kush Himalaya. But of course, many of the activities that we focus on are global, as the impacts from climate change in mountain communities are global as well. Next slide, please. So we focus on 4 different outcomes. One of them, outcome 1, is on improving the availability and use of mountain observation data and information. Outcome 2 aims to enhance science policy platforms at the regional level and increase collaboration and exchange. Outcome 3 focuses on strengthening knowledge on climate change risks and adaptation opportunities to inform global approaches to resilience building. And outcome 4 aims to ensure that global policy processes are taking climate change adaptation in mountains into account. Next slide. So under outcome 3, one of the core goals is to build the community of practice. So basically, we want to bring people together who are working in or should be working on climate change adaptation in mountains. This provides us a chance to connect and collaborate with experts, practitioners, scientists, and policymakers, and other relevant target groups, so that way we can share knowledge and experience and deepen learning about what adaptation options exist, because, of course, a lot of them are already out there. The community of practice is hosted on WeAdapt's mountain theme space, and it offers the opportunity to share content, including events, knowledge products, reports, and other activities that are occurring, and they're all hosted in one place. So a major aspect of the event today is not only to raise awareness of the community of practice, but also get some feedback and insight on how to best engage the different players. So you'll hear a bit more about that later. Next slide. So one of the main facets of this community is the Adaptation at Altitude Solutions Portal. The portal is a database of climate change adaptation solutions in mountain communities from around the world. These have been submitted by practitioners and people who have actually successfully implemented these projects, so that way you can find out a little bit more about how they worked, the challenges they faced, and other details as well. These cover different sectors and impacts from climate change, and they've been selected particularly due to their scalability and also transferability, which are both very key areas of importance in mountain areas. So I would like to invite you all to visit the Solutions portal and learn a little bit more about what solutions are out there that have already been implemented. And you can also take this opportunity to reach out to us if you have a solution that you'd like to be showcased on the portal. With that, I would like to introduce the wonderful panelists that we have with us today. Next slide, please. So first, we're going to hear from Carolina Adler, who is the Executive Director of the Mountain Research Initiative, who's joining us online. Matthias Jurek, who is the Program Management Officer at UNEP. Karen Price, the responsible of the Technical Secretary Andean Mountain Initiative from CONDESAN. Basanta Shrestha, the Director of Strategic Cooperation at ICIMOD. And finally, Sam Kanyamibwa, who is the founder and chief executive officer of ARCOS. So with that being said, I'd like to turn over to Carolina Adler, who's going to be joining us online. Hi, Carolina, can you hear us all right?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me fine?
Wonderful, thank you. So
great.
Now, given that you're one of the lead authors from the cross-chapter paper on mountains, I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of reflect on the climate change session from the morning and talk a little bit about how research and science can inform effective and sound policies for climate-resilient mountain development. And also maybe talk a little bit about how MRI's activities under adaptation at altitude have helped close the data gap.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex, for that warm welcome. And thank you also very much for the introduction and for the opportunity to contribute as part of this panel. Since this is my first time taking the virtual floor, in my case, let me express my sincere thanks to the Mountain Partnership Secretariat and also to the hosts and the local organizers for providing the means for virtual participation at this event. This is very important for the inclusive participation of all Mountain Partnership members at this key event for us as a global community. So thank you very much for this great support. Unfortunately, as is evident to you all, I'm not able to be with you in Aspen, but I am here in Zurich with copious amounts of Swiss chocolate to keep me awake to stay with you. So to your question, Alex, and listening to the interventions made earlier today by the distinguished guests at the climate panel, I was in fact very pleased and uplifted in many ways by the many references made to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC 6th Assessment Cross-Chapter Paper Mountains, which I had the honor and privilege to co-lead as a lead author with my dear colleague Flip Bester from ICIMOD and a stellar team of outstanding IPCC lead authors and contributing authors, and many more from across the mountain research community. For us, that is already a huge testament to the sort of impact that the research community, when coming together, can have in support of these global processes. And this experience for me illustrates a very concrete example for how the scientific community can engage through key boundary organizations such as the IPCC and be part of the knowledge production process to substantiate deliberations and help inform policies for climate resilient mountain development. Working through the IPCC entails taking a very global overview and aggregating a lot of data and knowledge from multiple projects and studies that have been published and carried out in many and very diverse mountain regions. Therefore, this only represents one of the many ways in which we can engage effectively at the local level, which brings me to another scale at which the research scientific community can also engage to inform policies, and that is at the local scale with communities. Learning with communities, and I say this with communities, through action-oriented and participatory research processes can also help distill very important, relevant information on the nuanced ways in which climate change impacts affect people and ecosystems in different ways, and how adaptation measures work, or in many cases also not work, to address those impacts. So data and information to track and measure how adaptation works across all scales is also a key research area that we highlighted as a conclusion in the cross-chapter paper Mountains. And recalling the different interventions that were made earlier today, in her excellent input, Anna Vukovi from the UNFCCC, in fact, mentioned the Convention's Nairobi Work Program and the many entry points available to also connect scientific knowledge alongside many other types of knowledge that are also available, may I add, with the knowledge needs of policymakers and practitioners and advocacy stakeholders as well. The Mountain Research Initiative is also a partner of the Nairobi Work Program, and this is also another way in which the MRI as a network can also make known their work and make available the types of data and information that support those knowledge needs. And I did also mention the cross-chapter paper Mountains could also provide a similar launching point for mountain countries and stakeholders within the UNFCCC in much the same way as the oceans community have been able to demonstrate and is possible to do. So this is certainly something that we take a lot of encouragement and motivation to see it through, and also to seek in terms of our activities going forwards. In the few minutes that I probably have left in my intervention, Alex, you also asked me about how MRI and geomountains activities under adaptation at altitude have helped close data gaps. The MRI and geomountains function and operate as global networks. And in the case of MRI, it's a global research coordination network. And geomountains works more on the at the interface between data and information, available not just for the research community, but more increasingly also to support processes such as those addressing climate through the UNFCCC and IPCC. And we have a number of key activities to help connect and support the research community in their efforts to integrate and synthesize existing data and knowledge. And let me emphasize here that there's quite a large amount of data and knowledge already available, and synthesizing these in the relevant formats is a key important activity that we promote through the MRI. And this is also one of the key ways in which we address those knowledge gaps. Through adaptation at altitude, Geomountains was able to mobilize the network and address key fundamental questions that were being asked of us as we conducted the IPCC assessment, such as how many people live in and around mountain regions across the world, and therefore depend on the ecosystem services provided by mountains. It sounds like a very fundamental, simple question, but in fact, there are many ways in which you can define the extent of a mountain area, and also the many different data sets that are available to account for population numbers, and increasingly also in terms of the higher resolutions at which this data is becoming increasingly available. So we needed to find a way to provide a comprehensive and also a comparative analysis using the best available global grid data sets at better resolutions as data also improves. So that was a huge task, and one that we could not do alone. This really needed a collective effort. So we were very happy to be able to count on the network to mobilize that particular work. And the beauty of this collective work is also that we've been able to walk the talk when it comes to exercising open science and the FAIR principles of open data. And the FAIR principles stand for being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Through the support of the Group on Earth Observations, in which Geomountains is very much a part of the work program, the MRI was able to make all of these analyses conducted for the IPCC cross-chapter paper through publications, but also including all of the scripts and codes that were used to support the reanalysis of this data and provide the opportunity to update those data and information as new data becomes available in future. This we felt was very important to do. As I said, it's important to walk the talk when it comes to open science. And one of the key ways in which networks such as the MRI can support that work going forward. The 7th assessment of the IPCC is just around the corner. That process is just starting. So the work is not finished. We're only just starting, and we're very heartened and very motivated given the wonderful feedback that we've also received as to how useful the cross-chapter paper has been for communicating what we do on reporting on climate change impacts, but also more importantly now and relevant is how we address those impacts through adaptation. Thanks, Alex, back to you.
Thank you so much, Carolina, and especially thank you so much for joining us from Switzerland. It's very late there right now, so we appreciate having you here virtually. So next up, I'd like to turn to Basanta. As we know, ICIMOD is a very important intergovernmental institution and a really good example of how regional collaboration can really work in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. So perhaps you could comment on how ICIMOD supports regional science policy dialogue in the mountain region.
Thank you, Alex. And once again, Greetings from the Himalayas and namaste from Nepal. ICIMOD as a knowledge organization. Science policy interface is a key facets of ICIMOD as an intergovernmental organization, as a regional intergovernmental organization. Also, as a knowledge organization, we believe information, data, information, knowledge are the public good commodity that influences policies, that can catalyze actions on the ground, that can catalyze investment for sustainable mountain development. So very, very important process. I also would like to backtrack to 2019 when ICIMOD launched a comprehensive report called Kush Himalaya Monitoring and Assessment Report. This was a result of more than 300 scientists, 80% of the scientists from the Kush Himalaya region itself, and many other scientists, including Carolina and many other colleagues, came out with a, if I may say, it's a mini IPCC report of the Himalaya by itself. It's one of the most comprehensive state of the knowledge of the Kush Himalayan region, covering many different aspects, but more so from the climate change and the climate action point of view. And for us to be having that sort of a science, to gain traction with the policymakers, to work with the governments, and to garner ownership and implementation of the what evidence is, what science tells, is a very, very important process. So once we released this report, we went to each of our member countries, 8 member countries, and we hold a science policy dialogue. And through this culmination of this different consultation in all 8 countries, we came about a manifesto or a call for action. We call, SK is call for action. But bringing this manifesto in a report form, circulate in a web form is one dimension. But to get this traction and the political commitment, in 2020, ICIMOD organized a ministerial conference of 8 member countries, which endorsed this SK's call to action and also call for declaration for regional collaboration for climate action in the Kush Himalayan region. So in terms of, I am just alluding to the kind of a perspective, how evidence-based science, data, information, knowledge, getting to a policy and also even to a political level in terms of gaining traction so that this SK's call to action gets implemented at the local level, national level, and also the regional level as a transboundary on many of the transboundary issues. Again, I would like to emphasize here, ICIMOD as a regional organization, our focus is more on a regional scale, regional kind of issues in terms of transboundary risks, in terms of transboundary knowledge that we generate and how this knowledge are being used by various governments and in a collaborative fashion among these member countries and so forth. So this declaration also calls for regional institutional mechanism in terms of having a regional institutional mechanism so that this can have a traction at the political level in gaining SK's call to action owned by these member countries and implemented at that level. Just the last point on that, with this all this science policy interface, we were present in a COP26 in Glasgow, and we have come up with 3 key messages. One is Kush Himalayan region is a pulse of a planet, because the kind of natural resource endowment that we see and the climate change impact that we are seeing in the Himalayan region, this has repercussion on the global system. So it is a pulse of a, to be able to recognize Kush Himalaya region as a pulse of a planet. Second, we have also launch a mountains of opportunity investment framework. But given the kind of emerging for earlier session on the climate financing or the financing opportunities, how we can leverage this knowledge value chain to attract investment for sustainable mountain development, and we saw in a preceding session. Third, mind you, we also operate in a very geopolitical sensitive region, and we call for regional collaboration, and we also call this as a power of eight member countries, how we can foster regional collaboration through data, information, and evidence-based science to foster regional collaboration, address some of the impending issue of climate change and climate action. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, and especially for bringing up the issue of transboundary problems, because of course regional collaboration is very important for these too. So next I'd like to look towards Karen, who is our representative from CONDESAN. So I thought that maybe you could talk a little bit about how regional collaboration and exchange have been strengthened in the Andes through the Adaptation at Altitude program.
Okay, thanks Alex, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Okay, in the Andean region, Adaptation at Altitude has promoted a different process and with different kind of actors too. For example, strengthening a regional collaboration with long-term monitoring, and this about with the Andean Forest Network, for example, or Gloria and Andes too. And this is because we need to have a learning site to promote the historical knowledge. And why this? Because it's important for us to design our strategies of climate adaptation, climate change, to take decisions. And in our region, it's not common to have all this information integrated in all the Andes. And other was promoting the science and policy dialogues. And this was interesting because this implementation was around how the countries put in order or put in action the climate change adaptation policies. Because obviously the advances between the countries are different. Some of our countries have national plans, others strategies, and others NDCs about climate measures. But it's interesting because not necessarily the mountain ecosystems have the priority than the rainforest or the oceans. And this kind of dialogue between or with the policymakers is interesting to have a more relevance with the ecosystem, mountain ecosystems. And another experience relevant for us was the exchange or interchange with other platforms of mountains, like the Andean Mountain Initiative, in our case with Alpine Convention or Carpathian Convention on Hindu Kush Himalaya, because the history of the other platforms are longer than us. And for us it's important because we want to understand, to learn the history, the roles, how is the operation, no? Because we want to enforce our work in the region. And also the generation of knowledge and integrate information about all the region, no? And this is really, really important for us. And different kind of information for the common people, no? With common language of information about the culture, about the biodiversity, the climate change, the water in the Andes, and also information with, for example, a platform for socio-ecological indicators, no? And you can see it in the We Adapt platform, for example. This is a little review of different kind of strategies that we put in action in the last 2 years with the Adaptation at Altitude.
Thank you very much. And yeah, there's quite a long list of activities that CONDESAN has participated in. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing just a brief overview. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to Matthias, who is from UNEP. Now, UNEP is responsible for the regional coordination with the South Caucasus and East Africa as well. So I thought that perhaps you could share a little bit about your key learnings during the past years in supporting the regional science policy structures in these two regions.
Thank you very much. As I work for UNEP at my duty station in Vienna, I want to start with the property Servus from Austria. I have quite a big challenge now because I know it's getting late, and speaking about regional governance might be not the most exciting topic for everybody, but I will do my best job. I want to start with a question. So who of you remembers what has been discussed at Rio Plus 20 in 2021? I was one of the mountain dinosaurs who happened to be there, but I guess some others as well. Anybody? Nobody remembers what has been discussed in Rio. What actually this was the Rio Plus 20 outcome, and which also was foreseeing the birth of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And if you look in the Rio Plus 20 outcome, you see also that a mountains chapter, thanks to the effort of the global mountain community, many of you who are here, was also included. And it actually also includes one operational mandate. And one of these mandates is actually to strengthen and establish regional centers of excellence. And this is the kind of mandate that UNEP has been built in the last years, and we have fostered our partnerships with the CONDESANs, with the ICIMODs, with the ARCOS and Sustainable Caucasus in the last year to see how we can really promote regional cooperation and dialogue in mountain regions. Obviously, speaking about the experience that we've faced, I will not speak about challenges, but only the good things that we have encountered. But of course, in our work in mountain regions, we are not just working with this kind of regional hubs, but also with regional institutions and frameworks, such as the East African Community. And it's quite important also to work with these frameworks and to embed our dialogues within these frameworks and initiatives to also ensure sustainability of our actions. And that can be, of course, very time consuming. I mean, obviously working for the UN, I hope this is also not recorded, we are quite aware about that certain process can take time, but yes, also in these regional frameworks, but it's also quite important because in order to ensure the sustainability of the actions. And sometimes what we have also faced as a challenge, how are we aligning our activities with the time frame and that processes, because of course a project is ending after 4 years, but certain processes which have been started have been just kickstarting. So it's also to ensure that we continue to provide support to these processes beyond the project life cycle. What we also know quite acknowledge is that, of course, all of these processes and dialogues were important and successful because they were actually based on a sound scientific support. And in some regions, it was also the science who helped actually to start regional dialogue. If you're looking in the Caucasus region, for example, where we have countries like Iran, Russia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, I think it goes without saying that promoting regional dialogue is quite a challenging job, and you would pick probably a different region to do so. But it was actually science that helped to build up a soft bottom-up approach and foster regional dialogue at the scientific and academic level, which is now further scaled up at the practitioners level and the policy level. And we already had a couple of editions of the Caucasus Mountain Forum taking place there, with another one hopefully moving forward in April. So building on sound scientific networks is also quite instrumental and key. Then, of course, participatory approach, involving governments and other stakeholders from... Okay, my time? No, still working. And really make sure that their voice is heard, and they also help to design the process and ensure the outcome. And working also with governance, what we've seen was there was always the leadership of one or even two more champions in the regions to take forward a process. Uganda has been quite instrumental in moving forward with an East African mountain agenda in strong collaboration with ARCOS. Georgia very much in the South Caucasus, Peru, of course, and many other Andean countries. And it needs this kind of champions to move forward with regional dialogue and be successful in the end. And of course, what is everywhere important, to ensure there's long-term finances. which have been provided by extra budgetary sources, but also multi-scale financing. So this is kind of our lessons learned, and we have seen some great milestones, including booklets, but also, of course, strong established science policy structures, and that have led to a fantastic outreach in the regions. And since we are celebrating 20 years of mountain engagement since the Bishkek Mountain Summit, I think it's also important to look back what we had at Bishkek 2002, which also led to a number of important initiatives which were created, including mountain conventions. And now 20 years in 2022, I think it's really great that we see there's quite a big potential and great political support to other regional processes in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, but also in East Africa and also in the Andes. And I want to finish my intervention with giving a big clap to the stakeholders, to the organization who've been really instrumental on carrying forward that processes today.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Now, Sam, so through ARCOS, you were one of the organizations that's actually been able to partner up with UNEP to develop the Mountains Adapt Solutions booklets that were launched earlier this year, showcasing some of the solutions from East Africa that could potentially be applied in other places too. So I wanted to know a little bit more about your role and how could countries and mountain communities that are in the East African community benefit from further regional collaboration for mountains past just what's already been done?
Thank you very much, Alex. I must admit that when we were engaged in this process, we were wondering what's going to be the end product, because we were looking at transformational solutions as far as the climate change is concerned. And I was amazed to see how much initiatives are going on in our region. And we had very, very strict criteria, but all of them were looking at good initiatives which have identified a problem and have come up with a solution. And you know, in climate change, we are looking particularly at communities who are mostly affected. And my main message is that there is quite a lot going on in Africa. There are many efforts being done, and we needed to build on this. And communities are doing everything they can to adapt to climate change. And this is what we gathered. Now, what we have, how can it help countries for more collaboration? In fact, collaboration, when you reach to the collaboration, you have already achieved a lot. I know I'm saying this from the heart, because my organization, Albertan Rift Conservation Society, ARCOS, has been engaged in mountain agenda in Africa for over 10 years now. As a mountain partnership member, we have participated in many policy processes trying to bring together different actors in Africa on sustainable mountain development agenda. Now, collaboration for nature and people is our motto as ARCOS. And we have, through this process, found that those solutions that we can qualify as successful, they have been collaborative. From the grassroots to high-level government involvement. So collaboration is the key. Now, how can these solutions can benefit for more collaboration? In fact, we have already started the process, because this has been collaborative, which means climate change bodies in different countries have participated in this exercise. The solutions which have been selected have the buy-in of the government. But most importantly, the communities themselves, they have been involved in shaping the success of these solutions. we have already engaged a process in East Africa for the East Africa Mountain Stakeholders Platform. And this is already on in collaboration with UNEP, with Grid Arendo, but also, very important, the East African community, the political economic bloc for Eastern Africa. Because this platform, which is being established, is going to be under the climate change thematic working group of East African community. And that is how, in fact, you can influence the political agenda, how these solutions, because one of the challenges when you have the information, when you have collected data, how can this influence the change, politically or on the ground? So the collaboration is already in place. We can see in Africa, and I'm happy that we are now discussing the next phase in this partnership, which is really very important to keep the momentum which has been achieved. Because these things, you can't do it just in a few years of a project lifetime. It is very important to keep the momentum, engage in a policy process, and see how the change can be achieved. Matthias mentioned the government of Uganda for having already developed a national sustainable mountain development strategy. And ARCOS was involved in supporting this process. And it takes really good leadership from the country, good support, participation from different stakeholders to reach to a landmark of a policy document like this. Now, in East Africa and also in Africa, we are looking at these adaptation solutions as inspirational stories which can reach different levels of the society. And as a regional organization, we are looking at how, in fact, we can make sure that these solutions influence good actions on the ground. So I'm looking at political level, but also community level, because we believe that the change, if you want to really to build a transformative change, we need to engage communities on the ground. And I'm happy to say that as we celebrate this International Year of Mountains, as we are heading to International Mountain Day in December, we are now developing an event which can bring together the African mountain communities together to share the lessons, but also to celebrate what they have been achieving. And I hope that everybody who is involved in Africa in a way, and even beyond Africa, we can together really bring the celebration of mountain communities to the voice locally, globally, so that we can celebrate the International Year of the Mountain. This has been a very good result, decision by the UN, and we can take advantage of this for the mountain communities to be recognized for what they are doing, but at the same time, to recognize that what they are doing is a drop in a big ocean, because the challenges are enormous. We need more investment, more efforts to support these efforts, little efforts that are being done in Africa particularly. So I see these solutions which have been compiled being really a foundation for more efforts, calling for more action to help the collaboration, the transboundary collaboration, the regional collaboration, so that we can continue to support mountain communities and also mountain ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, thank you all to all the panelists for all these interesting interventions. Now, As I had mentioned before, initially we planned to break into some small groups, but given the time of day, I think everyone's a little bit tired, so instead I'm going to pose a question to the group as a whole, and if you feel like responding, you can raise your hand and someone will come around with a microphone. So now you've all been exposed to the climate action panel of this morning and learned a little bit more about what adaptation at altitude is trying to do. So we're really trying to build a community of practice, that way we can find adaptation solutions for mountain communities. Now, given the interventions that you've seen by the panelists and knowing what you do know about the potential climate change impacts in mountain regions, I'd like to ask all of you, what is it that adaptation at altitude as a program can do and can do in a community of practice that could be helpful to you as you're trying to use some of these tools that we've mentioned, some of these solutions that we've mentioned. Is there anything that you can think of that would be very useful to you in your work that we could provide for you? I see a hand over here.
Hello, I'm Kendra Day from Vista 360. We're up in Wyoming in the USA. One of the big gaps in our climate action efforts is the education of the young. I just did a research project and found that 3% of American high school students are actually studying climate. And those are a few in an AP class. We just haven't made the change. The curriculum is appropriate for 20 or 30 years ago. And as I listen to all of this talk about how it takes 20 years to do something, the people who are going to be realizing our visions are in high school right now. And so if you could help us with educational tools and somehow get it inside the standard educational curriculum, that would really be important, I think.
Thank you very much. That's a great point. Right here.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm Onno Roem. Is this working? Yeah. I work for the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. We work a lot with ICIMOD actually, very well. And so it's really interesting to hear the combination of scientific approaches, which are of course extremely important, and also political mobilization, which is also really important. However, 20 years from now, most of the areas where we work, nobody will live there if we don't start really working now. I think what we should try to do more of, and we're all trying, so are we, so is ICIMOD, but we really should do more, is be very aggressive about using the science and using the science in a real lab and starting implementing. So even if what we implement is not perfect, if we do nothing, you know, think of northern Pakistan today. People are thinking, do I rebuild my house or do I go live in Karachi? Neither is a very good option if you think about it. Now, we actually do believe that adaptation is possible, but I think we should really push for implementation, because the mountain agenda has something similar to the climate agenda as a whole, which is governments don't like to invest in them because they don't think it's actually worth it. I don't think it can succeed. I think it can succeed. I think all of you think it can succeed, but I think we need to get more action on the ground, high up there, and do that by doing science experiments live with actual people. Some scientists might say it's unethical, but the alternative is not so good because they would have no habitat to live in.
Thank you very much.
My name is Muti Nepali.
Go ahead.
I have a. Thank you very much. The intellectual thinker has mentioned and articulated the mountains, nature of the mountain, and who control the mountain. We have need to who control the mountain. Especially the rural class, they don't give the high priority to the mountains. They give the road and so other benefit, because this kind of situation, Basanta sir already mentioned, the Nepal is much more excluded. 87 mountain cover, 10 Himalayas over roof of the world. Everest is the biggest mountain, but nobody's work there. It means, my question is that ICIMOD little bit mentioned the geopolitical situation and other situations, because as a thinker, as a scientist, they blockade the power holder. So always the mountain is a resource holder nature. If mountain destruct, the climate has destroyed. The climate has destroyed. The capitalist country has used the huge resources used by the mountains product benefit, just like before 1 hour ago, 1 hour ago mentioned the situations, consumer, the benefit, the private and public situations, they use themselves. And Australian thinker also mentioned the globally, the politically has invasions, the situations. It is possible without any kinds of afraid? The thinker, scientist has mentioned the reality without any kinds of situation. Especially so many thinkers had not mentioned drastic change. They give only the circumstances, just like a reference, because they feel the difficulties. If I mention the totally drastically change the situation to cover the mountains, high mountain Himalayas like that, Basanta sir already without hesitation you also mentioned, and Australian thinker and other South African and other thinker. My pleasure as a thinker, why you are afraid to mention to combating against this kinds of situation, mountain is destroying positions. It means this kinds of workshop is given the new kinds of horizon, new kinds of life for the shape of the mountains. This is a very good significant issue. But how we able, the rural class, the rural thinker, rural intellectuals, they don't like to mention. So I kindly request you please mention this kinds of thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, do we have any other ideas from anyone else about some inputs that adaptation at altitude can have that would be useful to you? Okay, I'd also like to give the opportunity now if you have any questions for any of our speakers. We had some very interesting panel presentations here, but if anyone wanted to speak further.
I would like to directly respond to, I think it was the second question in terms of how we can ensure also there's proper policy follow-up and the opportunities. And I think there's kind of two opportunities which we have right now. The one is, of course, see how we can learn from science and get the findings into the policy national level. And in a lot of mountain developing countries, that process is just about to kick off. So many countries are about to start to develop their national adaptation plan, supported under the Green Climate Fund. UNEP is actually in charge of coordinating that process for a number of mountain countries, including Georgia, Rwanda, Uganda, and I think one on the Kush Himalaya. And we also make sure that mountains matters are kind of integrated. And it's quite important, of course, if it's a process which is also taking some time of developing, but this kind of plan, once it is in place, is quite also fundamental in terms of upskilling interventions and providing lots of this nature-based solutions implementation at the larger level, such as through the Green Climate Fund, development banks. And I think this regardless, there's a great opportunity for mountain communities also to engage with the countermountains, see how they can actually work together with science to provide input to these processes, to also make sure that, let's say, like the mountain voices are being heard and that the governments are picking it up. Luckily, in the countries that we have been tasked for to lead that process, mountains have been already being put forward as a priority. It's not always easy because most national adaptation plans are looking at the sectoral topics. And of course, mountains are cross-cutting, but we're glad to see that in the initial proposal, which was being put forward to the Green Climate Fund, that many of those countries have already prioritized mountains.
Thank you very much. And Karen, you said you had a comment as well.
Yeah, it's about the comment for using the science or put more effort to using the science to take decisions about the climate change. I think obviously this is so important, and integrate to the natural science with the social science. No, in Pakistan have a so similar situation like Peru, my country, in the Gulf, glacier lake outburst flood, and our lesson learned was around the integrate these perceptions, the priorities of the population, because not necessarily the risk are the priorities. And it's interesting to integrate it. And for this reason, in our experience with the adaptation of attitude, design and develop, for example, the socio-ecological platform of indicators is a good tool to take this kind of decision, because integrate obviously the perceptions to of the population. Yeah.
Thank you. And did I see a question over here?
Hi, it's not a question, but a suggestion. I'm Ana from CONDESAN. We work in the Andean region, and we found that young people from the rural areas in the mountains don't find opportunities to stay in their territories, so they are living and working in the city. But we have been working with them for a while, and when you find the leaders in the territories that want to make changes, want to transform their territories and build opportunities for other young people, they are really powerful. So if you believed in them, if you help them find each other with exchange programs and things like that, it's a really powerful strategy. So maybe from the different regions that you work in, we can find these groups and make a network of young people that are compromised with their territories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe some reflection, hearing some of the comments here, thanks to our colleague from Aga Khan as well. We are here with a Mountain Matters team. And we all understand the complexities of mountains, importance of mountains, and also we understand the urgency of the mountains, urgency of action for, for the mountains. I think this is a very great forum in terms of bringing together from all over the world the alliances, but I still feel the mountain alliances needs to be further consolidated or further gain momentum in a global platform. Just to give an example, I see small island nations in the COP, perhaps they have a more weightage. Of course, sinking islands, I'm not doubting about the challenges there, but also we need to draw upon melting mountains as well, and I think it is not in the same parallel that we are there. Matthias mentioned about whole, if you look at the whole global mountain journey since 1992, from Earth Summit till today with 2022, with the International Year of the Mountains, I think we need to do more in terms of forging solidarity of the mountain voices and the mountain agenda in many platforms. Having said this, my second point is I think the challenges are so huge. I think we need to have a multi-stakeholder kind of approach. It's not one actor, public sector or the private sector. I think whole society, I think we need to accelerate towards this action. And also the point of youth, if you look at from the region from South Asia or Hindu-Kush Himalayan region, 50% of the population are under the age of 30. That's a demographic dividend. And ICIMOD has really, in new strategy, youth empowerment and educating youth is taken up as one of the key agenda forward. Having said this, ICIMOD cannot do solving all the problem, but I think we need to gear up the momentum. Just to coming back to, if I got your question right, I think I also would like to echo that we need to walk the talk here in terms of our action. And we need to put people at the centrality, community at the centrality. I was in a CSU meeting just last 3 days. I think we are talking about a lot of mountain community, indigenous knowledge and others. So we really need to put the mountain community in the forefront. I'm just eating almost a red light here, so I'll just stop here.
Yes, but anyway, thank you very much. If you have a super fast final comment, Sam, I'd love to hear it.
2 points. One, I think I want to echo the comment about the schools and education, because this is really very important, particularly in Africa, where we have, the over 60%, even more, of the population are youth and in the schools. I would like to invite probably the audience to refer to the international program on eco-schools, which is in several countries, 84 countries. And this program is looking at the quality education, but also how the kids can grow the spirit of sustainable development and sustainability, from entrepreneurship to income generation, but also taking care of the environment and having the notion of harmony between nature and the people. Harmony starting from our body, which is a result of harmony. Our body is a good example of harmony. The nature itself is harmony. Every little creature depends on the other, and an ecosystem lives in harmony. But when it comes to people, we don't have that harmony. We are fighting each other, we are trying to divide, and when it comes then to our harmony between ourselves and nature, it is a disaster. So the eco-school is trying to teach the children from the young age to grow with that notion of harmony. Secondly,
I'm sorry, we're going to get...
sorry, briefly.
Very quickly, please.
The theme of this meeting is about ideas to action. Probably this session is about solutions, ideas which have been compiled. There is no better opportunity to call for action. And I would like to see actually our meetings reaching more and more, or directing more and more to this action. How can we work together to address the problems towards action? And I'm looking at Rosarora, how can we really, as this wonderful coalition of a mountain partnership, really trigger collaboration, working together in a resource mobilization for action? I think there must be a way to do this. And this is something I would like to see my organization involved, because I know that the momentum is there for action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, we are out of time now, so I'd just like to quickly wrap up. The Adaptation at Altitude booth is just outside as well. So if you have any more ideas or want to get involved in the community of practice, please feel free to visit us there or online at adaptationataltitude.org. Thank you all so much.